So we are back again, and I shall continue from where we had stopped. As I told you, we have two basic models. The traditional model and the competency-based model, which we shall be looking at, and we've just seen that model right away. So the next most important thing that we see are the features of effective competency-based education. And an effective competency-based education should be able to answer the following questions. What is it that the students should be able to do after he or she has undergone the learning process? Answer: the learning outcome. What is it that the student needs to learn or know in order to reach the learning outcome? Curriculum-based learning resources, not limited to the textbook, so the teachers are expected to go beyond the book. What are the kinds of classroom transactions or activities which will become the basis for this learning? Obviously, it's going to be experiential learning activities. How will the teacher gauge the level of proficiency of a student with criterion reference testing? And how will the teacher check the learning, or how will the student demonstrate the learning? Through assessment. So Rajkumar Sa Jogbani have raised a hand. So I'll let you unmute Rajkumar Sa. Please ask your question. Rajkumar Sa Jogbani, please ask your question since you've raised a hand. Seeing no question, I lower the hand and mute you, sir. And I believe that the rest of you would have taken down notes from this particular slide. Thank you for that, Titi ma'am. So why competency-based education? So teachers need to understand what education is and what is the purpose of education. The nature of knowing, mind, and the human subject, problems of authority, relationship between education and society. It is a self-reflective statement of one's beliefs about teaching and learning. In principle, such education is learner-centered and adaptive to the changing needs of students, teachers, and society. The creators of competency-based education envision that at the end of the learning period, every learner should have achieved critical thinking and problem-solving skills, learning to learn, imagination and creativity, digital literacy, communication and collaboration, citizenship, self-efficacy. So quickly in the chat, I'm going to move the chat to panel to one side. So in the chat, I would like you to quickly mention what are or who are the illiterate in the 21st century. Come on, let me see if you know this. In the chat, quickly in less than a moment, who are the illiterate of the 21st century? So I see a few answers in the chat, and the chat says people who do not know computers in today's world are illiterate, or people who cannot connect with technology are illiterate today. Apparently, that's what we think after the pandemic. But according to the 21st century researchers, oh, lovely Snehata Kumari ji, that's a brilliant answer. People who haven't got humanity in today's day are illiterate. Apparently, by research scholars, it has come to the notice that people who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn are the illiterates of the 21st century. Therefore, as educators, we need to ensure that we are competent enough to take in all the important 21st century skills within us, imparts them and inculcates the same in our students. So let's head back. The video panel has come down, but let's head back to the main presentation. Now let us look at this classroom scenario. One student is having trouble in understanding a mathematical concept, but he happens to be a big fan of Pokemon. And aware of this interest, the teacher plans a personalized project for the student based on his own Pokemon cards. By playing on the student's interest, the teacher gets him to work through the problem and demonstrate his mastery of important mathematical concepts. When the student hits a snag in the project or lacks the knowledge to finish it properly, he realizes that help is needed. Transparent goals and outcomes thus help students to take responsibility for their learning path. This ownership in turn helps them to become better learners now and into adulthood. Competency-based education also helps free up class time for the teacher, allowing him or her to visit and help those students who struggle. The teacher can also use this time to set up targeted interventions and help students who are falling behind. So I have already told you this in the beginning of the session. Competency-based education consists of 6 critical components. Lucid learning outcomes with reference to the skills or proficiencies required. Flexibility in time frame to acquire the skills, meaning thereby that the learner can achieve each learning outcome at his or her own pace within the given year. Selection of innovative pedagogies or instructional activities to acquire the skills in the classroom, to ensure optimal guidance to individual learners, availability of a range of engaging content for both the teacher and the learner, criterion reference testing, assessment of learning outcomes, certification of the level of proficiency in learning based on demonstrated learning outcomes. And when you go to see competency-based education, it looks in, or it's divided into these three broad categories: curriculum design, teaching and learning, assessment. And we shall take a quick look at each of them. So when you go to curriculum design, NCERT has developed learning outcomes in all the curricular areas at the elementary and secondary stage, linking these with the curricular expectations and pedagogical processes. The expected learning outcomes have been developed class-wise, from class 1 to 8 for EVS, science, mathematics, social science, English, Hindi, and Urdu. And the link to the learning framework is right here. Give me just a moment. I will copy the link and share it with you in the chat box so that you can all avail the learning framework. That's the link. I hope you can access the link. We'll come to that, Mukesh Kumarji, if in today's session, Mukesh Kumarji, if in today's session your question does not get answered, do remember to ask it again. So writing learning outcomes on the basis of the framework provided by NCERT. A complete learning outcome will consist of an observable behavior or an action verb, along with any special condition for displaying the outcome. Action verb denotes the intended domain in the taxonomy of cognitive domains and focuses on the cognitive processes operating on different kinds of knowledge. Dimensions like factual, procedural, conceptual, and metacognitive. After the action verb comes the subject content for which the action verb is being taken, followed by an explicit level of achievement. If it is not implicit, it has to be explicit. The performance level is considered sufficient to demonstrate mastery. Test items are prepared and matched to the learning outcomes assembled before initiating instruction. So learning outcomes are usually defined by the following features: clear language without any ambiguity, behavioral activity, measurable outcomes with desired performance criteria, link to teaching and learning methods. Assessment and evaluation must be aligned with the overall competencies mentioned in the framework developed by NCERT. So there's one more link with me, which I'm going to share right away with you. It's a PDF link. So I think that would help you a bit more than many other links. Then we talk about teaching and learning. Once again, there is, if you go to the CBSE website, the academics website, and you click on CBE resources tab, you will find this in the CBE resources tab, teaching and learning, teacher energized resource manuals. These are particularly for the math, science, and English teachers. So teacher energized resource manuals or terms are currently found only in science and math, and English I know is coming up. So the teacher resources aid in implementing competency-based education in the classroom. These grade-wise resources, particularly in science and math, are aligned to the NCERT learning outcomes and textbooks and provide the teacher exemplar assessment strategies and lesson plan strategies. At the same time, we have a teacher training module on competency-based education. In this module, self-access training module, hands-hold teachers in training, in understanding and applying competency-based education to their classrooms. This module is accessible on the Diksha and Nishtha portal. And I think all of us have done Nishtha elementary stage courses. We've done Nishtha secondary stage courses, and we are also doing Nishtha 3.0 Nipun Bharat courses. Teaching and learning, teachers' resource for achieving learning outcomes. And in this you have please do not annotate. It shows how ill-behaved you are. So this resource is aimed at supporting teachers to incorporate learning outcomes, mapping the learning outcomes with the NCERT framework in the day-to-day teaching. Okay, competencies are applied skills and knowledge that enables learners to successfully lead their life, perform the work required by them in daily life. They are a way to verify that a learner has in fact learned what has been intended. There are 6 underlying principles guiding the implementation of CBE by CBSE in relationship to assessment: equity, accessibility, reliability, validity, higher order thinking skills in assessment, real world relevance, and linkages. So Mukesh Kumarji, I believe this is one of the answers to the questions. This answers the challenges question for Mukesh Kumarji. So when we talk of the key terms in assessment, in competency-based assessment, we have these very important key terms. One such key term is assessment, the process of measuring something with a purpose of assigning value is called assessment. When we talk of purpose, the primary reason for which assessment exists and what the results of this assessment will be used for. Validity, how well a test measures what it is supposed to measure. Validity in Hindi is also called Vaidata. Reliability or Vishwasniyata, how far the results of an assessment are repeatable. And manageability or Prabandhan Kshamta, how feasible it is for the designed assessment to be administered. So once again, let's go back to our Menti cloud. And let me change the slide. Let me change the Menti slide. It is the same menti.com and use the code 805-38741. 805-38741. That is the code on menti.com. I don't see people on to Menti. Menti.com. The code is 805-38741. You'll need to write something onto that Menti screen. I'm sharing my screen so that you can see what's come up. And you can see the purpose of assessment coming up. Struggle, success, aim, identify the gap, remedial measures, evaluating learning outcomes, intelligence, student achievement, make an idea about a lesson, bridge the gap, understanding, intelligence, merit, identify gaps, gain student attention to judge student knowledge, okay, I can see people are very, very interested in using the chat box also today. I'm happy you're interested in the chat. And then is somebody who's, okay, there are a few questions in the chat. TT ma'am, I request you to keep track of the questions. As the questions are flowing in during the session in between. If they are not answered by the end of the 2-hour-long session, then feel free to ask them. Now, this is what we have just covered. And we also went to Menti. So now we have a little match the following for you people to do. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to open the match the following. In the chat, you may quickly write what are the different types of assessments that you are aware of. Come on. Let me see how smart you've become in the chat. What are the different types of assessment you are aware of? So Kavita Haralka, no, Kavita Haralalka. Sorry for that pronunciation, is saying behavioral assessment, whereas Niranjana ji says formative assessment and summative assessment. Good. Pooja Chaudhary, formative and summative. Tithi ma'am says pen paper, viva, extempo, group project. Zarko and Naseem pen paper assessment. Summative assessment. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a list over here and ask you to match each of the columns. Match the correct pair. These are 3 kinds of assessment. One is diagnostic, one is summative, and one is formative. So in the chat, you will write whether A is diagnostic, summative, or formative, whether B is diagnostic, summative, formative, and whether C is diagnostic, summative, or formative. Decide which of these is each one. So the first one I find as summative. Thank you, Shambhu Prasad ji. Ashish Prabhakaran ji says summative, formative, diagnostic. And let us check the correct count. Neelanjana ma'am says diagnostic is at number 3. So summative is at A, number 1. Usually high-stake exams, certified, and allow students to progress like standard Standard X and Standard 12 exams, professional qualifications, formative, usually low stakes. Tests which are not certified are used to help students and teachers understand how well students are performing. It is like the end of term or end of semester tests. And finally, we come across diagnostic, which are low-stake tests. They are not certified and are used to help teachers and students understand strengths and weaknesses before they begin teaching and learning. For example, entry tests, quick fire, quizzes, etc. Now, when we go to purpose of school assessments, if you remember writing onto the Menti screen, then I remember correctly, you had written this as the last thing, as the purpose of assessment. All of you had given me the same purpose of assessment. Which is this one. Every single person had written this on the Menti screen. And now with your kind permission, I'm going to end the Menti screen because it's getting too much on battery. Purpose of assessment in education measures student performance against a set of knowledge, understanding, and skills. Assessment schemes in schools can serve a number of purposes. To provide certificate achievement as a method of selection for further study and work, to help students understand what they know and what they can do, to help teachers understand how their class is performing and what additional help they may need. At the same time, assessment schemes need to determine what students know and understand how they can learn. So assessment schemes in schools would ideally determine what students know, understand, and can do, as well as discriminate between students of different abilities, so what we call differentiated learning. Now, I think somebody in the chat had asked me what is the challenge, one of the challenges faced by competency-based education, particularly for assessments. So here's your answer. Assessments need to be balanced using the competency-based demand. So manageability, reliability, and validity are all interconnected with each other. When I come to teaching and assessment, if you go to see, top center is also the subject and the bottom center is competency-based learning. If you move from the right, which is your right, then the subject moves to the pedagogy and the learning outcomes, and that in turn takes you to competency-based education. And if you move the other way down, you will have the subject, the content, and the assessment objectives. All of that will then take you to your competency-based education. Now we come to assessment objectives or AOs. They are short, succinct statements which set out what skills will be assessed. And often based on the Bloom's taxonomy, you give clear guidance in your marking scheme to the evaluators who should know the kind of questions which have been designed. You actually need to give them very, very clear guidance based on the Bloom's taxonomy. Generally, 2 to 5 assessment objectives are tested in most cases. There may be more, but normally 2 to 5 are tested. And they must be linking or linked to the important statement by learning outcomes defined. An assessment of objectives has a washback effect on teaching learning. If skills are assessed, then there is a student engaged and the team is given a lot more of positive encouragement. And the teacher teaching these skills will also motivate students in the process. So when we talk of assessment objectives, all of us know the Bloom's taxonomy and the 6 domains of cognitive approach, where remembering and understanding are level 1 and 2 of the taxonomy, dealing with the lower order, and applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating become the higher order. So assessment objectives are generally based on generic or specific, but they are normally based on the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, when you visit the CBSE website, you will see a question bank for class 10 in the CBE resources. When you click on the assessment tab, I have put a screenshot here. And you will be able to pick up a lot of resource material for yourself from there. Then you can see the British Council question banks, which you can download. You can see practice question papers, which you can download. And there are some weekly questions for practice, which again you can download. Now there is less than a minute left for this meeting to end. So we shall quickly disconnect and rejoin.